Now, yesterday it was announced that Just Stop Oil activists will halt their protests on the M25 with immediate effect.
Members of the organisation have been blocking the motorway for 4 days, leading to mass disruption and multiple arrests. And the pause is to allow the government time to do the right thing.
But they might want to pause.
I know the irony.
Anyway, the police have said that the pause will enable them to focus their resources on other crimes.
Joining us is the writer and broadcaster Emma Webb to discuss this. I mean, unbelievable, these eco-zealots, so out of touch with the public. I think it's 90% out of touch. 10% might be supporting them. Emma, what are your views?
GB News' very own Andrew Doyle tweeted yesterday suggesting that interview with a lady called Indigo Rumbelow, that he thought that might actually be satire. And I think that's where we're at now, that these, there's a slightly amusing aspect to a lot of these interviews that you see with these activists, because they do seem so hysterical to the point of satire. But there is a really worrying aspect to this. And, my research background began in extremism, researching particularly Islamist extremism. And when I look at these people, I'm seeing so many of the signs associated with extremism. The fact that if you look at these interviews, like I mentioned, that one with Indigo, you see that they're increasingly unable to engage with interviewers in any rational way. They just provide these sound bites that they seem to have picked up from elsewhere and then put together in a kind of pastiche, which is one of the reasons why I think they come across as being so satirical. The fact that their attitude, as you've just mentioned, by having this pause on their protests, is really that, unless you meet our demands, we will continue taking hostages. This is a fundamentally anti-democratic movement, and they are willing to literally put people's lives at risk and to break the law in pursuit of their highly ideological goals. And I think that that's very concerning, because that is really teetering on the brink of something that could turn very, very nasty.
Emma, I just wondered, as far as I'm concerned, these people are lunatics. I want to get that out there straight away. But trying to be sympathetic to them, should we not be a bit more understanding? Because, it's a bit like during COVID, when the government employed a deliberate strategy to put the fear of God into people, and then there was no wonder that people got very extreme over what COVID measures should be in place, because the government had, in effect, forced them down that route. Is the same not been happening with all of this sort of net zero and climate change and all the rest of it? That in effect we've got the government basically saying how catastrophic the consequences are going to be if we don't tackle climate change. We've got all this, what goes on in schools and universities is probably even more extreme. And so it's no good anyone belly aching at the end of it when people leave and come out and start doing these things, because the government and schools and universities have been basically indoctrinating them with this stuff for years.
I agree. I think a huge amount of fear has been whipped up, and all you have to do is look at the founder of Extinction Rebellion, Hallam, his comments suggesting that at the end of the world, and this really has been compared to an apocalyptic doomsday cult, that what people will see is that they'll have their homes invaded and their terrible things, I won't say it because it's morning weekend television, terrible things will happen to their families if nothing is done about this, and that everybody is at risk of extinction. And I think that this has whipped up a huge amount of fear in young people. And I say young people, but I use that lightly, because a lot of the people that we've seen interviewed in the last week or so are around 25 or 28. That isn't very much younger than me. And yet they seem to be behaving like people in their mid-teens.